If I take a look out at the men I see in the world who are following the standard path or have no paths or are just sort of awash in the standard societal stream, the civilized world, what results do I see out there?
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
40, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shot fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
I'm going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everyone. This is The Squad Room, the podcast that helps you, the modern warrior, achieve your full potential and fulfill your purpose as a first responder. This show is about being a better modern warrior, how you can be the leader this world needs you to be, and how to be the best version of yourself possible every day. You must understand that as a first responder, you are a leader, and it is my firm belief that we are the absolute best our nation has to offer, and that we must burden ourselves with leading others if we are to save our country. We are our nation's modern warriors. I am your host, Garrett Tesla. I am a almost 13-year veteran of a sheriff's department in Southern California, and on this show, I seek out ways to be better, and then I share that information with all of you. We have a lot of new listeners to this show who are probably, this may be their first episode, or at least their first new episode since they've subscribed or signed up for our mailing list, and I want to welcome them to the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the partnership, the line that they are about to enter. We have a lot of people who have discovered this show who are wanting to join law enforcement, and I'm humbled by the support that I've been receiving recently. Some housekeeping notes. You may have, if you're a member of the Facebook group, which I highly suggest you join our Facebook group. It's a closed group, and we have some discussions on there that get a little bit more in-depth at times. I just realized recently that if you've sent me an email in the last couple months and I haven't responded, it's probably because it somehow went to my spam folder and it got auto-deleted before I caught it. I didn't realize I had emails going to my spam folder until just recently, and I had quite a few, and I'm sure that I lost lots and lots of correspondence because I hadn't checked it in so long. Well, my apologies. And if you've sent me an email and you still want a response or still would like some feedback, shoot me an email at garrett@thesquadroom.net, and I will make sure that I receive it this time, and I will do absolutely everything to get back to you quickly. I apologize for that. Lots of great stuff going on. Some things, I got some exciting news this week that I can't quite talk about yet, but something to tease for towards the end of the year. It is going to be an exciting project for me, and I'll get to that. I am currently sitting in a hotel room outside of Los Angeles International Airport watching giant airplanes land right outside my hotel room here in Los Angeles for some training, and then in a couple days from when this is released, actually by the time this is released, I will be in Tampa hanging out with Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, a former guest on this show, a real leadership expert, and a man who literally wrote the book on leadership, Game Changers. I'll be spending the weekend with him, getting some in-depth time and some in-depth knowledge out of one of our previous guests who will be coming back on this show at some point. Scott, if you're out there, you know you're coming back on this show. All right, so today's interview is somebody who, again, if you're new to the show, you may not be aware that this was, and we get into it, so I won't rehash it all to here. If you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, you know who Traver Boehm is. Traver is the definition of a Renaissance man. He is my personal Buddha, and he is the guy that I go to when I need some advice, I need some counsel, I need a coach, or I just need a good person to talk to. He is all of those things. Traver is a former professional MMA fighter, CrossFit gym owner, a man who is both certified in acupuncture and with degrees in Eastern religions, who spent 28 days in pitch black darkness in Guatemala 28 days hiking in the mountains of Utah by himself and learning how to survive in the open. He is the most interesting man in the world. Traver's got a new project. We talk about that. But it's a timely topic, something that's been in the news almost constantly recently, about the idea of masculinity and manhood, what that means in relationship to being in law enforcement. Where do we define and how do we define ourselves? How much of that do we get? How much of our job is influenced by our masculinity and vice versa? How, for the female listeners, the discussion about how you relate to the men in your life. Traver's got, as always, some great points, some interesting discussion. And so without further ado, here's my interview with Traver Boehm. Traver, welcome back.
Thanks, brother. Always a pleasure to be on the Squadroom.
Always a pleasure. You know, we have a lot of new listeners from the last time you were on. And so for people who've been following for a while, they know that you're a recurring figure. You're like that guy on the sitcom, like the neighbor. He's not in every episode.
I'm the Kramer of
you're like
the Squadroom?
I don't know if you're Kramer. You're more like the, what was the mailman? What was his name?
Newman?
On the show? Newman, yeah. You're not in You're not in every episode. I mean this as a compliment. You're not in right. I don't know how you take that as a compliment, really, but you're not in every episode, but you come in quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
I get the like mid-level, almost failed analogy, but thanks.
Almost failed. Thanks for sticking with it. So, yeah, for people who don't know, I mean, you were an integral part of the because we have a lot of new listeners, a lot of new people, a lot of people who are just getting into law enforcement who are now listening to the show, which is awesome. Appreciate them joining the show and spreading the word too, because they've been great for getting our message out there. But I've realized a lot of people don't go all the way back to the beginning when they start a podcast, nor do I.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that you were basically my co-host for the first about 10-ish episodes.
Yeah.
And have come through, and we've done numerous episodes together. Your last one was, I think, number 75, which metrically this is only about a dozen episodes later. So it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it has actually been quite some time since we've talked. And I wanted to, you've got some interesting stuff going on, stuff I think that relates to us as law enforcement, and and then what your project is right now, I think, is interesting because not only does it speak to the men that are obviously the majority of the population of law enforcement, I think it's something like 86% of cops are male, but it speaks to the females too, and the relationship between the two. So, the last time you were on, maybe ironically or appropriately, we talked about the 8 steps of overcoming divorce because that was something you had gone through, and you really leaned into that experience. But as you were coaching people and kind of helping them get through some of the divorce, you came through with your own theory that you are now have stood up and are running, and it's been hugely successful for you, and it's called Man Uncivilized. Yeah. So tell us about the germs of how that project started and and the ethos behind it.
Sure. So I was working with, as you said, anybody or people who are going through a divorce. And the asterisk by that was, I want you to use this really shitty, horrible situation as fuel to up-level your entire life. Mm-hmm. So you just found out you're getting divorced. I'm really sorry that happened. And fuck yeah, let's get to work. What do you want to look like? Who do you want to be when all of this is done? Mm-hmm. And for the first time in my career, I started getting more male clients than female. So as an acupuncturist, most of my patients were female. As a trainer, most of my clients were female. And it was just how I ran businesses. But
why is that, do you think? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
Sure.
Because I've described you as a Renaissance man. My nickname for you is, of course, my personal Buddha.
Thank you.
Because, and again, meant as a compliment.
Taken as a compliment.
Both of my references to you have been about overweight, large men, and
like
you're not at all. Like men. Newman and Buddha. Not at all what I was going for, but you have an ability to live in both worlds. I think that's my perspective on you. I mean, from pro fighter and bodyguard and Division I athlete to acupuncturist and Eastern medicines guy, and so So that was my answer. I asked you a question, and then I just answered it for you.
There you go. Yeah, I can speak female really well.
You speak female. You could hold
classes. And as an acupuncturist, the vast majority of clients or patients or people seeking out that kind of alternative medicine just happen to be female.
Okay.
Females are more interested or more likely to invest in themselves, where men are more likely to invest in like a business or a structure or a car or something to that effect. So that's predominantly why.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
for the first time, I had a bunch of male clients. And not only were we talking about ways for them to use the shittiness of their divorces, but we started looking back at what led to the divorce and what led to the divorce on their end specifically, because we can't control another human. And I found patterns, and the patterns were ways that they were deficient in what I viewed as a fully integrated, empowered version of masculinity. It's like, oh, I'm having the same conversation over and over and over with these guys, and it's how they relate to being a man, or how they related to masculinity, or how they didn't. Most of all, like how they didn't have a framework for that term or that understanding. And so I started playing with the idea of, oh, I wonder if I'll just start working more and more with men. And my buddy here in Brooklyn, Adam, a great coach, Adam Cobb, we were sitting around one morning about to go to the gym, and he goes, when was the last time you had McDonald's? And I was like, man, I haven't had McDonald's in 20 fucking years. He's like, well, why not? I was like, that's civilian food. He's like, what are you talking about? That's civilian food. And I was like, it's 5:30 in the morning, and you and I are about to go to the gym. We don't eat fast food. We don't have a TV. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't live how normal people live, and I don't want the results of a civilian lifestyle. And neither do you. It's clear, telling him. He was like, oh, that's really interesting. You know, how does a civilian live? And I started going through this idea with him of, yeah, they eat shitty food. They don't care about their bodies. They're stuck and most likely have no relationship to their pain. They feel trapped. They're checking boxes on the outside but having no satisfaction or little satisfaction on the inside. And so it just started this idea, Garrett, of, I'm working with men and I don't want to live a civilian, in quotes, lifestyle, and I don't live that way. If I take a look out at the men I see in the world who are following the standard path or have no path, so are just sort of awash in the standard societal stream, the civilized world, what results do I see out there? I see guys that are overweight. I see guys that are dying 10 years earlier than women. I see suicide rates at their highest in that demographic. I see depression. I see drug abuse. I see us leading every category that we don't want to be leading it. So what is it about that civilian lifestyle that's not working? And how can I take it apart and look at it from a completely different perspective, which I called man uncivilized, and had some ethos around it, like the uncivilized man trains. The uncivilized man eats for his health. The uncivilized man this works really well with law enforcement. I took it from Bodyguard. People are safer because he's around. So his natural inclination is as the protector. His natural inclination is, my goal in life is to be the strongest man in any room I walk in, both physically and emotionally and spiritually, if we'll just call spiritually for that term. And I wanted to have a man, or I saw this with the guys, that a guy who has his head, his heart, and his balls all in communication with each other throughout the day was just kicking ass. And any one of these male clients who was leaning too far one way or the other was out of alignment. So I know the terms, the divine masculine, from my own training and my own experience, which is meditation, space holding, nonviolent communication, a connection to something divine, right? A man who walks in the world with a purpose that's greater than his own. That, to me, I call the divine masculine. And I wanted to couple that, though, because I knew men who were in that state or in that space. And they were these beautiful, gorgeous, happy, hippie men who, God bless them, couldn't pick up their body weight off the floor, fight to save anything, and weren't really out there in the world kicking ass. They knew something about their lives was missing. They weren't fucking their women. There was something, they had swung to the feminine side fully. And then I knew guys on what I call the primal masculine side, which is, you can just think about it, primal, which is probably a lot of your demographic, is guys that are fully engaged in their bodies, in kicking ass and martial arts and shooting guns and survival in the very base level of masculinity. But the challenge for those men is they have no sense of who they are on the inside.
Yeah.
You put one of those guys in a room and say, hey, I want you to sit quietly for 10 minutes, and they'll freak the fuck out. Hey, I want you to hold space for someone while they have a breakdown in front of you in your relationship. And even that term, do you understand what the idea of holding space is? Can you be okay, or do you have to be doing? And I found that men were swinging one side or the other, or they were lost with no sense of either. And that was the guy who's just completely, he has no fucking clue what he's doing. He's literally just as disempowered can get. He's just in his head all day and following. He's a sheep, right? He has no concept of where he wants to go or why he's going to get there. But a man who takes both of those, who takes the divine and the primal, who opens his heart and has a full grasp of his balls, that guy is crushing shit in the world. And his inner life is as rich and satisfying as his outer life is. So whether he's diving out of an airplane or sitting quietly reading a book, he's equally as satisfied. And so I came up with a structure, like a 12-week course for these guys to go through, and just ran a couple of guys through it, said, hey, let me know if this works. And I watched their entire lives shift, from their businesses to their bodies to their relationships to their sex lives to their finances, like you name it. Because we were changing the roots, all of the branches of their life flourished. Where normal coaching or normal ways we attack goals is we just go after the branch. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, my finances aren't good. Okay, well, set aside 10% every month. Now you got to get down to the root. What is your relationship to money? And more importantly, what is your relationship to your own personal power? Because that is your relationship to money. And then your relationship to money is reflected in your finances, etc. So that was the idea, and I constantly come back to the question with these guys of a civilized man is not a leader, very rarely. Or he's leader at work and he's just a docile sheep at home and his partner's just crushing him. Very rarely do we find a man that's leading in every single area of his life. Or there are guys, I'm here in New York City, that are crushing it in finances and are one Big Mac away from a heart attack, right? They're not leaders in their own health or in their own bodies. So it's really a question of where are you not leading and how can we get you to lead in every single area within the paradigm of, guess what? You're a fucking man. And that's really, really important for you to understand. And that's really, really important for you to relate to. Your own sense of manhood, your own sense of masculinity.
So I'm curious about obviously masculinity and manhood and being a man is such a big topic right now.
Yeah.
It's in the media a lot. So to me it sounds like, man, uncivilized. I think sometimes for people who are in the CrossFit world, they think uncivilized, they might relate that to this, like a paleo or a caveman, Neanderthal. But it doesn't sound like that's what you mean by it. More so I think the comparison for our audience is, civilian versus sworn. We're sworn personnel, and we refer to people who aren't sworn as civilians. And we go through the same kind of ideas that they are sheep, and that we are there as protectors. We are the sheepdog, and people, like you said, feel more comfortable with us when we're in the room. But at the same time, going back to Grossman's great essay on the sheepdog versus the wolves versus the sheep, they don't like having us around until they need us, but they want to know that we're there. Right. And there seems to be a lot of parallels between the idea of the sheepdog and uncivilized man. So
definitely. So
what do you think? Like, do you have a definition for what masculinity is in this day and age when it's kind of being challenged?
It's less of a definition and more of what I was saying before is it's an expression.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So a definition's hard, but an expression is literally what I was saying before. To me, a fully expressed version of masculinity is someone or a man who is fully expressing his masculinity, has full access to his brain. He can think through a problem. You put a task in front of him, he can sort through it. He can plan. He has full access to his heart. And I mean that in that he's got a wide range of emotion. He actually has an emotion other than anger and horny, right? He understands sadness, fear, anxiety, frustration. And these aren't necessarily classically what we call emotion, but he literally can run through a sense of emotion at any time and express it without fear or shame, right? You guys see some of the most, I can't imagine being a fucking cop for a day, right? Like I have a bad day and someone's upset on the phone. Awesome. I walk them through it. They get through it. But so in your case, someone who can literally have the wherewithal and courage to say, I need to go cry in front of a professional, and this is going to save 10 years of alcoholism and suicide off my life, for a shitty example. So someone has full access to his heart. And then again, what we're calling full access to his balls is just being a man, being someone who's out there, a driving force in the world. Someone who has an idea or a concept of, I need to give my greatest gift to the world, and that is my number one reason for being here. David Data says to penetrate the world with your gift. That is the purpose of man. So my idea of masculinity is someone who can flow through the three of those at an appropriate time. So if I'm sitting here and I need to do my checking account, I need to tap into my brain. Yet if I'm struggling because my parent died or I just saw something horrific or I'm upset, I have full access to the space in my chest to feel emotion and express emotion. And I have no shame about that. And then it's time to go lift some weights and get shit done. Man, I'm going to reach down and grab my fucking balls, metaphorically or otherwise. So that's my definition of the real expression of it. It's strength, it's kindness, it's compassion, it's power. Right? It's all of these things together, as opposed to what we're hearing so much right now is it's only the feminine side of it. Right? Guys need to be more, we were talking earlier, guys need to be more vulnerable. Guys need to be more expressive. Guys need to be more emotional. Okay, awesome. I don't hear a lot of men saying like, hey, you know what? Women need to be more mechanically inclined. Women need to be better with power tools. Like, why aren't we saying that shit? That's the flip side of men need to be more vulnerable. And I do agree that men need to be more open and honest, with a comma right after that, with a huge foundation of strength underneath it. Personal, inner, and outer strength.
So it sounds like you agree. I want to get your opinion on this, but this comment or this phrase, toxic masculinity, that has been being used a lot. To me, it seems like you would say that that's an oxymoron, that true masculinity is not toxic at all. What's your take on that?
I think the term is made up and imaginary. So it's no different than if someone were to say, oh, unicorn masculinity, or it's just nonsensical. It's a really convenient way to package feelings that people who are afraid of masculinity or have been hurt by men can categorize so they feel better and feel safer about the term. But the definition of masculinity in itself is not toxic in any capacity. If we want to say something, we say the shadow expression of masculinity is toxic. So I've written about this, that there's nothing toxic about masculinity. There's very much toxic about toxicity, whether that's coming from a male or a female.
Yeah, and that could be, well, like you just said, either side.
Either side.
But if you're doing those things and you're not really functioning in that highest of masculine traits or highest of masculine abilities, right?
It's just immaturity across the board.
Yeah, immaturity. That's
the word. It's like, no, you're not. It's not toxic masculinity. It's immature humanity. Whether it's a 6-year-old girl or a 40-year-old man or a 35-year-old woman, right? People do bad shit to each other. People do bad shit in their lives. People operate off of wounds because they feel like that's their only choice, or that's the patterning that they've created because they're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to express some kind of emotion that they don't have an outlet for. But yeah, there's no fucking such thing as toxic masculinity. Anybody hearing that term, just kiss it goodbye.
What do you think? So you mentioned, kind of the three things: physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I wrote down in my notes right here, this civilian lifestyle, and what I wrote the note fog of work, because that's something I think that we can easily fall victim to. We in our profession, between the shifts and the overtimes and the sleep deprivation and the bad choices with diet, it's easy to get into that Groundhog Day of rinse and repeat on life, and all of a sudden you wake up and 3-4 years have gone by, and so I'm wondering, how do we begin though? I know how we've talked at length on and off record about the physical stuff, and sometimes that's just a matter of moving. But what has been really driving me recently is how to get started spiritually, however you define that. And I'm not a religious person,
me either.
At least in the context of a church and a kind of
an Abrahamic religion.
Yeah, exactly. But there's, and I'll just explain my own path for people so they know where I'm coming from. But
sure,
we have talked, and a lot of people who listen to the show, and a lot of cops who are trying to be better. This is people who don't want to be better, people who aren't interested don't do this, but a lot of people have been drawn towards Stoicism, and I've talked about this on the show before. But that then naturally, as I read through that and learned more about that, led me into more Buddhist teachings. And I'm going to be starting to talk out of turn here in about 2 seconds because I've only scratched the surface. Even though I got a D in my Eastern religions class in college, still passed, but that was 20 years ago, and I wasn't ready to hear a lot of those things at the time. But at 40, with 2 kids, with a goal of doing these exact things, right? I'm curious what that path looks like. Do you have any for me or for anybody else when we're like, we want to explore that more? And by exploring it doesn't mean just reading a book. But it really means about going in and leaning into that experience. Where would you start? Where would somebody start?
Sure. So the first place I would start is to shift the word spiritual and change it with conscious.
Okay.
Because spiritual is loaded.
Sure, yeah.
Spiritual has some new age fluff and nonsensical bullshit to it and a lot of bypassing, which we have to be careful with Stoicism. And if people don't understand the term, but bypassing is when we say something really bad happened to me or I witnessed something really bad. I'm going to pretend that I'm not affected by it because of spiritual reasons or intellectual reasons or whatever. So it's like, oh, my girlfriend just broke up with me. That's okay. It must be part of my path. And that may be true, but you also have to go through the very human experience of having a breakdown and falling apart and crying at Hallmark commercials and shit like that. So let's get bypassing out of the way. But first and foremost, so here's my definition of consciousness, is literally how do you relate to the present moment? And so think about that for a second. In this moment, are you reliving or fantasizing that the past was different? Like, are you watching a movie in your head? Period. Are you fantasizing or projecting a movie about the future? Right? Where are you right now? Are you in the past thinking about an argument that you could have won and now you are? Are you talking to your boss in your head? Are you thinking about that next date? Are you having a sexual fantasy? Are you thinking about kicking the shit out of someone? Are you reliving one of your arrests? Or are you literally focused on what's happening right here, right now? And that is the doorway to your inner life. That is the doorway to what all of these books are actually talking about. And reading the books is great, but it's like reading books on swimming, right? You can read an entire library on swimming, and then you still got to dive in that pool and start scratching away. So first and foremost, how do you relate to the present moment? And then how do you relate to every stimulus that comes into your consciousness that wants to create a reaction? So you guys can use a perfect example of, let's take the present moment and call it an arrest, or you're pulling someone over to the side of the road. Okay, so what do? You take a deep breath and you go, okay, I need to be focused right here and now. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner 2 hours from now. I'm not going to be thinking about the argument I just had with my ex-wife 2 hours ago. I'm walking, I see everything, I know where I'm at. Okay, now I'm having a conversation, and this person just called me a prick. Okay. That's the stimulus. Now, here's consciousness. Consciousness is actually taking the breath and making the choice of how you're going to react in that moment. Make sense?
Yeah.
Are you going to allow that to penetrate you and then you punch the guy in the face? Are you going to laugh and be like, this has nothing to do with me? Are you going to be compassionate and think, oh, wow, this person must be having a really, really bad day. I feel bad for them. And that's consciousness. Sometimes the present moment, the guy calling you a prick, is bigger than your consciousness system, and it just knocks you over. And then what do you know? Now you're on YouTube because you did something stupid. Like, some things are bigger than we are, and they're bigger than our ability to handle. Right? There's a reason why people faint when they hear of a death. It's like it's too much stimulus for their consciousness system. So where do you begin? You begin with a practice, man. It all comes back to one. We can call it meditation, or we can call it just literally, what are you focusing on right now, and how long can you focus on that thing?
All right. Mindfulness, really, too, right?
Mindfulness, absolutely. We call it mindfulness. And how often during the day are you catching yourself in the past or in the future and pulling yourself back to the present moment? Whether that's, oh, I love to drive. I don't think you guys are allowed to listen to music, are you?
Oh, yeah, we can.
Okay, so think about it. You throw music on. Where does it go? It takes you somewhere. It takes you to the past, or it takes you to the future. It takes you, etc. But imagine if there was no more music and you just were focusing on your breath. Right? So we can take Stoicism, we can take Buddhism, we can take Taoism, we can take most of the major religions. And what they're saying is the kingdom of heaven is within. You have there's an entire another world called your inner life, which when you get to a point where that's more interesting than your outer life, you've reached this state we call enlightenment. Or in the U.S. society, we call you fucking crazy because you're walking around like talking to people, right? But those people are crazy happy or crazy crazy, right? This is, the vast majority of your clientele.
Right.
Are either enlightened or on drugs, but that's where I'd say you begin. You know, and I've been in the fog of work. I remember working nights with DeBecker, and weeks would go by, and I'd be like, "Holy shit, that was a month. I don't know what just happened to me." You know, I was at night, I was during the day, I was at night, I was during the day, and it's then a matter of one realizing that the stimulus called your job is bigger than your consciousness at that point. And so making the conscious decision, man, and here's something that's going to be hard to hear. Are you okay being in a job that has a pattern that doesn't call for consciousness? Right? Period. That's okay. And then you make that conscious choice. Yes, but it's worth it to me to be a servant in this capacity, and I will just do my best. It's no different than guys that used to ask me, like, how do I get really good at jiu-jitsu as a cop? I'm like, well, how often are you training? Like, I can get in here like twice a month. Like, okay, well, it's going to be really hard. There's nothing I can tell you. There's no secret path to jiu-jitsu enlightenment if you're training twice a month. And you have to make a decision.
Right. Do
you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, or do you want to be a cop? Just like people have to make hard decisions or decisions with consequences all the time. So your job is not set up to lead to consciousness. It's not set up to lead to health. It's not set up to lead to a lot of things that are positives in society. And the price for that's the price of getting to see the things you get to see, to be a part of something really special, to be an elite club, and to be of service in a way that we need. So you have volunteered to put these things on hold, or to put these things off of your plate, to have this extraordinary experience called law enforcement.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it was a conscious choice 13 years ago. The whole point of this podcast is how to navigate this as best we can, right? As you know. I mean, you know that. You know, and we had a whole episode with Richard Gerling, who's a lieutenant in Oregon, he's the founder of mindfulbadge.org, I think.
Okay.
But we had a whole conversation about mindfulness on patrol and how to be mindful and a cop and how it actually keeps you safer.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to give a real world tangible example of kind of what you were talking about, it was this week. There was a shooting in Pasadena, Texas, and I don't want to shade the officer because he did a good job, but so we watch a lot of these videos for training opportunities. We dissect them after the fact, and we frankly Monday morning quarterback it because we can learn a lot of valuable things when we look at what was done right, what was done wrong. And I always talk to my guys about what's called the preoccupation with failure, which goes to another episode I had with Dr. David Klinger, who used to be an LAPD officer, who was involved in a shooting, and then went and got a sociology degree. Anyway, he's got this theory of preoccupation with failure was, I'll break it down to 3 simple questions. Did you get lucky? Did you win? Or did you lose? And you can break down pretty much anything that happens on your shift into those 3 tactical questions. So anyway, in Pasadena, Texas, officer pulls a guy over. He's not pulling over right away. He's kind of playing the game. Pulls over, gets out of the car. Officer orders him back into the car. He refuses, eventually pulls a firearm, a couple shots off at the officer. Officer gets some rounds off and eventually takes down the suspect. Clean shoot. No, there was no, and it was all on video and on body camera. There is 0 issues with the shoot. Yeah. What we noticed and what I saw, the very first thing I saw when these cameras went on and we watched was he's got his phone in his hand while he's in the middle of pulling his car over. And you can see the screen, and it's on the text message screen. Yeah. And so here he is in the middle of the most dangerous thing that we do in law enforcement, which is a traffic stop. Yeah. And he is already distracted by having a phone in his hand, much less the phone is then on a conversation. And I thought, it just relates right back to this, he's not present in that moment. He's allowing himself to be distracted by these things. And he ends up in this shooting holding his cell phone while holding his gun. Oh, wow. He never ditches the cell phone. Right. And I think it's such a good, tangible example of what you're talking about of being in the moment. Sometimes it literally is watching what's in front of you and dissecting what you're observing, but also other times being in the moment is just those distractions. It is deadly for us to allow those distractions to come in. Right. On a patrol or on the street basis. But I think to go deeper into it, it's just as deadly when we do those things, when we allow those distractions to go on, that cacophony, even when we're in a safe place, Of course. We're at home off duty and we're not in that present moment and we're running down that, like you said, the hill about an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or the finances and what's coming up and getting that cycle to stop, And it comes down to that mindfulness and then a meditation practice, I think, or some sort of journaling. Maybe journaling for some people, meditation. A big thing for me is checklists. Right? I write checklists all the time to free my mind of those things that are on the to-do list or on that, I have to worry about it tomorrow, but I'm not going to worry about it today. Right? Yeah. Or maybe worry is not even the right word. Address. I have to address it tomorrow. Right. But there's nothing I can do about it until tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to clear your mind of it. Yeah. That's why it goes down on paper. Words need a home. Mm-hmm. And they'll either live in your head for a while or they'll live on paper. Or you can tell them to someone and they live between you and that person, which is why converse is a separate topic. But it's why people say, hey, I really need to tell you something. I need to take these words out of my head and give them to someone else. Mm-hmm. But mindfulness, if we think about it, people freak out about meditation practice. I relate it this way. You can walk around all day, and whenever you think about it, you can do a squat. And that's having your own practice. Or you go to the gym and for 40 minutes someone tells you what to do and you fucking squat and lift and snatch and deadlift, etc. That's meditation. Mm-hmm. That's the practice of saying, I'm going to squat for the next 15 minutes unimpeded and uninterrupted. But it comes down to the same ideas, Garrett, of relating to your life, right? Time flies because we spend it elsewhere. We don't, this is a great metaphor. As a fun offshoot, I went to lunch with a matchmaker here in New York because I wanted to know what are guys failing, how are they failing on dates? Tell me about this. And this woman was like, here's the best advice I can give you. Be on the date that you're on. Guys are so worried about what happens next date or what happens when I get home or what am I going to, it's like, just be here on the date. And I was like, holy shit, you just dropped some high-level Buddhist knowledge on my ass sitting here in a restaurant in Brooklyn. But it pertains to all of us. Like, be in the moment that you're at, as opposed to being elsewhere. And that's not what we see. This is what if I tie it back into Man Uncivilized, what are most men doing chronically? What are most humans doing? Go look at people. Like, we have the greatest distraction device ever created in human history in our hands most of the time. We'll actually hold it when we have shootings.
Yeah.
Right? We have cell phones. And so most people are watching TV. We can't sit still. We're just so uncomfortable in our own bodies.
Yeah.
It's either television, drugs, alcohol, cell phone, porn, shopping, some kind of distraction, as opposed to, no, the uncivilized man can sit and fucking sit and be still and breathe.
So so this has been on my mind the last couple of days.
Sure.
Is thinking about the language that we use.
Okay.
The language I use in my internal dialogue, with the language I use with my team, the language I use when I write the blog, or the language I use with a suspect or a victim, or with friends or my wife or my kids. So much of what we experience, or what other people experience of us, more appropriately, is in the language we use. And I'm curious what you think from the Man Uncivilized. Is the language? Is it a language of? I'm trying to put it into the right words, but manliness or aggression. Is there such a thing as there is such a thing as aggressive language, but I think in law enforcement. Well, let me back off all this and tie it to something else, because I think that being present, right, and that's such a thing for us, even on the job, being present, even if you're not getting shot at, you've got the report to write, you've got that other investigation you're dealing with, you've got calls stacked up, you know that this is the 5th call you've been on shift, and you've got 20 more in the queue because you're calling a call, or maybe you're a call-to-call agency, or the to-do list. You're always thinking about how to best time manage your time, and you're not often giving 100% of yourself to what's in front of you, the call that's in front of you now. And some officers are really good at it, some aren't. But I think that's part of why we tend to use language, we being law enforcement, we tend to use language that will then dehumanize people. And not to their face often. We're professional enough that we don't use it to their face. But it's recently become a concern of mine, and something that I'm working through myself, is the language we use when we're around each other. And that becomes toxic, to use that word again, but negative. And I think that becomes a good example of toxic masculinity, is when we talk about, like you say, so people who are in pain. Anyone who's committing a crime. This is a whole other topic, but people are in pain, right? And if they're coming in front of us, they're in pain in one way or another. They're either pain of victimization, or they have gone through something in their life that has put them into a position where they felt criminal activity was totally appropriate, and that only comes from pain. Right. And it could be a pain of poverty, it could be a pain of childhood or a fatherless home, but it's pain in one way or another. Right. And we need to be better about seeing that pain, and then in how we use the language of people. But we talk so negatively of people sometimes, and I do it myself. Don't believe me. I've caught myself in the same language cycle before. But when we talk about them that way, then we end up, just like anything else, you think it, you speak it, and it becomes a belief.
Absolutely.
And, so I'm thinking out loud more than anything, but just the language we use. What is the language? What is the language of an uncivilized man?
Beautiful question, and I'll back this up.
And it took me 20 minutes to get to it.
It's okay. That's beautiful. Thanks, man.
I don't know if that made any sense.
You got it. No, it made perfect sense, and it gave me some backdrop to work with. I am obsessed with words. Fucking-cessed with words, especially as a writer. Yeah. But more so because I had a friend who years ago would stop me mid-sentence and say it again, words are things. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she'd say, words are things, Traver, you have to know this. And as I became more mindful of the power of words, I became that obsessed as well. And so if you want a fun experiment, ask someone if they need help. Ask your spouse tonight, like, hey, you need help with that? And see the reaction. And then try it again the next day and say, hey, do you want help with that? and see the different reaction, especially when you're talking to men. Do I need help? I don't need fucking help with anything, ever. I'm a man. Would I like some help? I would absolutely like some help. So if you ask, do you want some help? That's a whole different question. Same intention. So words are huge, but that's the polite part of it. Mm-hmm. One of the most important aspects of my coaching is to reframe and redirect the languaging of these men and to say, whoa, did you just call yourself a pussy? I don't ever want to hear that word out of your mouth again, ever, unless it's about, yeah, we'll just leave it there. I don't want you to call yourself a bitch. I don't want you to call yourself a faggot. I don't want you to call yourself any of these terms ever fucking again. And I say it in that manner, like, I do not want to fucking hear that again, because it upsets me, because I know that's then in your ear all day long, right? And so, as you said, if you speak it to someone else, that is your inner dialogue. And your inner dialogue sets the framework for your entire life. It literally is the voice in your ear. Mm-hmm. And so the language of my men is high. It's high. High vibration isn't the right term. It is the most empowered choice they can make. So as opposed to, I'm a fucking pussy, or I was a pussy, it's, I didn't have enough knowledge back then to know that I could do better. Or I didn't have the skill set I have now to do better. Or I just had I had a poor moment. Right? Very different than I was a fucking bitch. I was a fucking pussy. I bitched out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, given the skills and the talents you had at the time and the decisions you had to make, you chose the way you could, and now you're choosing a better option. And so there's always a reframe.
Kind of an idea. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Say, if you want a fun exercise, one of the things I had doing an online challenge for the next 2 weeks. And this is a exercise I give to every single one of my clients in their first week. Mm-hmm. They have to take a pair of headphones and a cell phone and record a voice note to themselves. 5-6 minutes, that's it. And in that voice note, they have to talk to themselves about all the things they're proud of, all the things they love about that. And it sounds fluffy. It's not. It's not like, you're the greatest in the world. It's like, you know what? I love the fact that you're dedicated to your job, man. I love the fact that last week you had a tough choice to make and you chose the hard way. I love how you've been hitting the gym this week and working on yourself. I know there's room for improvement, but I love how you're really getting after it. Right? I'm proud of you for X, Y, and Z. I'm really excited about these things that are coming up. Man, things are going really, really well right now. Or if they're in a tough spot, it's just giving compassion. And I have tons of, I don't look at porn. I say, so if someone finds my computer, I have no problem. But if someone finds my phone, they're going to be like, this guy was nuts. He just recorded. He loved to hear himself talk. Because I have about 20 of these. Uh-huh. And if something good happens in my life, the next day when something good happens, I record a new note the next morning to talk about it. And then every morning after I pee and list out some stuff I'm grateful for, boom, headphones come on. First 5 minutes of my day are spent with, good morning, Traver. It's you. Guess what? Yesterday was awesome. Look at all the stuff you got done. Look at blah, blah, blah. Look at that smart choice you made. Look at that. You paid an extra truck payment this month. Can you believe that? 6 months ago, we were worried about where they was going to come from. Mm-hmm. And I'm hyper vigilant about the word choice. So that, to answer your specific question, the words they use are compassionate, kind, strong, and powerful. Period.
Say those again.
They're compassionate, kind, strong, and powerful. I speak to myself like I would speak to the son I don't have. Mm-hmm. Like I would speak to you as my brother. If you were like, oh, I'm such a fucking bitch, I'd be like, you know what? I don't like you speaking that way to my friend. Don't say that again. Or don't say it around me. Actually, no, don't say it again, period. Because I wouldn't let some dude come up and be like, Garrett's a fucking pussy. I'd be like, oh, really? Cool. Guess what? Now we learn MMA.
That was Traver cracking his knuckles, by the way, for everyone listening. Just did that perfectly.
That was choke defense time. Right? So why would you let yourself speak to yourself that way? So, yeah, it's a cultural thing with cops. And for men, It's a really easy default. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right? Like, oh, we can bond around the fact that we're calling each other pussies or we're joking with each other. And I grew up that way on the East Coast. Like, mm-hmm. East Coast on teams, I used to tell my ex-wife, like, I know guys like me when they make fun of me.
Right.
I know guys, like I'm on, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, I'm sure, with your community. And then I got into really conscious communities, which are like, oh, no, we don't speak that way. So don't say that again, please.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, shit, why not? But this is how we bond. You know, I walk up, I punch him in the arm, I call him a little bitch, and that's how he knows I love him. They're like, well, find a different way to let him know. Because whether you like it or not, that's damaging. That leaves a residual that, hey, man, good to see you. Loved what you did last week. Super powerful, everything that you're doing. I love the way the movement of the squad room's going. Awesome. Keep it up.
Yeah.
How different is that interaction?
Yeah. There you go.
Right? And Garrett, I get the emails back from these guys and from women who say, that voice note was one of the hardest things I've ever recorded. It made me cry. I'm not happy right now. Fuck you. Like, it's great. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Because these are words that you haven't heard in a long, long time, or words that you desperately need to hear. And you most likely need to hear them first and foremost from yourself.
It's a practice I've done, and it's difficult at first. But I think you're absolutely right that we can't use negative language with ourselves and expect to use positive language with others. Right?
You cannot.
It's
you can't do it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and if we do, it's just superficial, and it doesn't. It's not working anyway. We don't. There's no meaning behind that.
Right.
But I like the high expectancy kind of language you expect, and I think
it's conscious communication.
Yeah.
It comes back to, again, am I choosing the words that are coming out of my mouth? And brother, I catch myself doing this too. Right? I still catch myself defaulting to, like, watching football and be like, that was a bitch pass, and I'm like, you know what? Shit, I gotta pull that back. That's not the way I speak in the world.
Right.
And holding that standard. It's like, how do you want to live a different life? You have a different standard. What does a different standard means? It means you catch yourself. It means you hold yourself above how everybody else speaks. Right? Listen to a bunch of guys talking. That's how civilian men speak to each other. Because they won't drop into something deeper and bond over something deeper. They won't touch those wounds and say, man, I really need to work on this. I need to open this up and deal with this thing that happened in my life, as opposed to just calling everybody a fucking pussy. Because that's my protection from not letting anybody know that, man, I'm hurt.
I want to give people some perspective too. It's not like you were born this way, or that you came into this early on. You went, for people, again, because we have new people who haven't heard your story, and I highly recommend they go back to all the ones we've done, because you've got a crazy story to tell. And a number of them. Yeah, and a number of them. But you came to this through your own process, and you were predisposed to being open to some of these ideas because of your background and your college, your studies in college on these kinds of things. But I mean, you say you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't watch porn, but that's not who you were at one point, right? That's not the Traver I'm sitting in front of today is not the same Traver that was even
3 years ago.
3 years ago. So I want people to make. I want to make sure, and I don't want to go through the whole story because again we have episodes they can go to, but I want to make sure they understand that this is not something that you have not the gauntlet. You've gone through that gauntlet yourself.
Yeah,
you've used that language with yourself, with others. You've gone through negative, masculine type relationships before. You've dealt with some demons that we all encounter. So it's I just want to make sure people understand that this is not like you pontificating like you were the perfect person to begin with. You came to this. And listen to the episodes. You literally came back. You came to this through the trials and errors of your own life.
Yeah. And had to fall back over and over. Quick summary is when I lost everything, I had to start asking the question of how do I want to rebuild from rock bottom? And the answer was I want to do it consciously. So I want to ask myself every fucking day, is this something I want in my life? And if so, why? And that was my relationship with alcohol, my relationship with drugs. How do I want my sex life? How do I want my relationships? How do I want my body? How do I want my thoughts? All the way down to how do I want the thoughts in my head? because I have some level of control. I may not have control over what pops up in the moment, but I have control over whether I run with that thought or I politely ask it to leave and replace it with a more empowering thought. And that led to more empowering actions. That led to everything being questioned, as opposed to, I don't know why I do that. Right? I can tell you why I do fucking everything. Because I got ripped down to rock bottom to the studs and then rebuilt behaviors and patterns and thoughts from ground up.
I don't think I've ever asked you this question before, but what? Because I'm in a similar situation. Well, I mean, that's not accurate, but I'm in a feeling of a similar situation right now where I need to deconstruct a whole lot of stuff. A whole lot of the things around my identity, right? I mean,
right.
Or I need to add back a lot of the things about my identity, maybe that aren't directly related to law enforcement. More of the father, more of the hobbies, the sort of stuff like that, and all that. But what, when this was all going on, how did you think of it like an architect? Okay, and let's use the analogy of you're torn down to the studs. How did you consciously rebuild? Was it that 28 days in darkness that you used, or was it just journaling? Did you just sit and meditate and it kind of came through you over the course of time, or was it just like you sat down one day and you figured it out about what path you wanted to take?
No, it wasn't nearly as linear as that of a sit down and this is how I want to do it. It was really being open to the question of how I'm relating to every aspect of my life. So, okay, I need to have new ways of relationship with women. Okay, let's do this. Let's have relationship and see what works and what doesn't, and what feels good, and what would I then have a real clear lens through which to ask. Am I hiding something? Am I letting fear take over and make this choice for me? Or am I consciously choosing this because it is empowering? And so it was just it was a real experiment, Garrett. I do not want this to sound like it was a checklist. It was a daily experiment that I'm still engaged in, and having references that were like, oh, wow, I really like how you live. Wow, that's fascinating. I have never heard you say a negative word about someone else ever. And anytime I do, you ask me, are you sure you want to speak that way in the world? Holy fuck. Okay, I got to adopt that principle. Oh, wow, this guy gets up and works out at this hour and he looks like that? Huh. Okay, let me try that. Okay, that works for me. Oh, wow, I want to be able to walk into any room and have a conversation without the barrier of a drink in my hand? Let me run that experiment a couple times. And let me sit with the discomfort of not sprinting back to the old pattern. That's the biggie, right? If we take a snapshot right now of your results, they are the reflection of your patterns and beliefs.
Sure.
And a little bit of luck, we'll say. But so if we want to change the results, we change the patterns and beliefs. And every time we do that, we run into a pain point. We run into this juncture. And that juncture is, if I go right, it's going to be really scary and uncomfortable, and there's a shitload of pain there. Or I can go left and go familiar, but the left list loops back and gets me back here 6 months later, 3 months later, 5 years later. So it was really making the conscious choice of every time there was a painful option, I was at least going to try it and see what happened and freak out. So let me just throw that right out there, that there's been a lot of freaking out and a lot of, I have no idea what's going on right now, and this feels awful, but let me sit with it and be honest about it. And I got a lot of help, man. I got a lot of coaching. And I'm not pitching my own course here, but I have coaches right now to this day that I still have to check in with. And people say, like, oh, how can you have a coach if you're a coach? I'm like, guess what? I'm still human, right? I still have patterns. I still have challenges. I still run into stuff. I still have stimulus that I don't know how to deal with, right? People think like, oh, you get to be a black belt and you're done training. And then you talk to the black belts and they go, yeah, I got my black belt. And I realize I didn't know fuck all, right? Now I know how much I don't know. And so it was a lot of that, Garrett. It was, our conversations. It was great people and taking input from them and keep going back to that same word of conscious. And that came through a ton of journaling, like every morning dissecting, like, how did yesterday feel? What's going on in my life? Why is this happening? Why did I act that way? Shit, what is that? What's underneath that? So this sort of insatiable curiosity of my own inner life. Like, why do I do the things that I do? Mm-hmm. And do I still want to do them? And if I don't, why am I not changing them? Oh, because I'm afraid of the unknown, or because my identity's tied up in being a CrossFit coach. I can't walk away from that. I had the beauty of having the slate wiped clean for me, and the god-awfulness of having the slate wiped clean for me.
Right.
But I didn't have to consciously walk out of my marriage. I didn't have to consciously leave my business. On some level, the business I did. But, it was like I got to rebuild with the sense of curiosity and a ton of positive input. So when the line, like you are the summary of the 5 people or whatever you surround yourself with. When you surround yourself, and when I surrounded myself with people who speak a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way, and I could just sense, man, this is different than how I've been in the past. And what do you know? The results you guys get are different than the results I got in the past. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let me now try to take what you do and mold it into my own being, and then move forward from there.
Well, Traver, you're certainly one of my 5. My language is always better when we're communicating.
Good.
I told you a couple of weeks ago, I was complaining about something, and you shot back. You didn't challenge me directly, but it was subtle, and I thought, well, that's stupid. I'm using victim words, and
right.
I'm letting myself down by using that kind of language.
Yeah.
For people who want to learn more about you, read some of your writings, where do you want them to go?
Hit my website, traverboehm.com. It's TRAVERBOEHM.com. Or I do a daily blog post on Instagram, which is at Traver Boehm. Again, TRAVERBOEHM.
And I'll put the links for all your stuff in there. You've got some great
Thanks,
articles on the challenges we're going through right now. I see so much of what we do. Again, I can't speak to the female experience in law enforcement, but to the male experience, and
every woman that's married or dating a cop.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's that, but there's so much going on with the idea of masculinity right now. There's so much going on with the language we use towards the people we deal with and our conscious choices, or more scary, our unconscious choices that I've been wanting to get you on to get your perspective on it. So thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, brother. I love coming on. I love your audience. I said I always get messages and emails from you guys that just make my whole week or my whole year of them telling us how they're applying the stuff that you and I talk about and the positive changes they're having.
I love hearing that too. And if you are listening, hit Traver up and let him know you got something out of this.
Thank you.
We do want to know that we do want to know people are getting something out of this. And
yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, it's good to talk
to
you.
All right, brother. Yeah, you too. Take care.
All right, thanks for listening to this episode of The Squad Room. If you like what you heard today and if you got something out of this conversation, please do 2 things. Consider leaving a review on iTunes, and also share this episode with someone you think needs to hear it. As we mentioned in the show, Traver and I, seriously, if you follow Traver because of The Squad Room, let him know. Shoot him a DM or reply to one of his posts and let him know that you get something by his conversations here. We always like to hear that. And I know that a lot of you have, because a lot of you have already done that. To keep up to date, you can text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222 to get signed up for our mailing list directly from your phone. Of course, you can also reach out on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room, and also that Facebook group as well. Join there. But our mailing list will be where a lot of the stuff happens. And I know I've been saying that for quite some time. It's still true. Just things are busy, and I have to choose between recording episodes or writing. And so oftentimes recording episodes takes precedence over writing new emails. But they are slowly building. If you want to know how to support the show, again, just share it. Spread the word. Give it to a friend. Grab someone's phone out of their hands and have them subscribe to the show right then and there. That helps us a great deal. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.